Hello everyone, welcome. Okay, so in this video, I'm going to talk about how to create lines and lines with arrowheads using paths. Alright, and we would use the Fabric.js library in order to do that. So I actually set up a very simple board over here. Okay, and let's go to the HTML first. All right. Okay, so we just need a few things before we dive into the creation of these three lines, okay, that I'll be talking about. All right, so a straight line, a single, a line with a one arrowhead and a line with double arrowheads. Okay, but before that, all right, this is just a simple setup, okay, in my HTML file over here. So you can use your own editor for these HTML files and all of that. All right, for me, I use the Visual Studio Code in order to do this. So I have a Fabric library, okay, the JavaScript file, all right, that I have actually copied, okay, and you can actually go to the website, okay, the Fabric.js website over here, all right, and if you go to the bottom, you can download the latest version, okay, and you get the code over here, all right. So once you copy this, you can create a file. So I created Fabric.js minified JavaScript file, and I link this in my header. All right. And I also have a CSS file. Okay. But before we talk about the CSS, I created a few elements over here in my body. All right. So the first element is the canvas element. Okay. And I gave it an ID of canvas. And I created a div. And this div, I gave it an ID of shapes container. And within this div, I created three more divs, okay? And these three divs are buttons, all right? So the buttons to create a line, the button to create a single arrowhead line, and button to create a double arrowhead line. Okay, and I gave all these buttons a class of shape button, all right? And I have another file, which is main.js, and all of our coding would be written in this file. All right. So before we write any code, okay, let's go to the CSS and see what I included over here. So it's just a very simple, okay, coding over here. So for the body, I gave margin and padding 0 pixels. Shapes container. Okay, so remember the shapes container is this shapes container. All right, so the display is grid template columns. Okay, there are 3 columns, so auto, and padding, background, and all of this the positioning as well. Okay, and the background color is black. All right, and I gave it a class of shape button. Okay, so each of the buttons will have a width and height of 40 pixels. Background color is beige. And the border, okay, for left, top, and bottom, 1 pixels. And the cursor is a pointer. All right. And if I hover over it, okay, it will be gray in color for the background. So as you can see, as I hover, it's gray in color. So you can play around with this. All right. And I gave all these 3 buttons an image as well. All right, and the last one, the double arrowhead, the border right would be 1 pixels. Okay, so remember, all right, over here, all right, there's the borders are only for the left, top, and bottom for all the 3 buttons. All right, but for the last button, okay, we want the right border to show as well. Okay, but for the others, it doesn't need to have a right border because it would merge with one another. Okay, so the left border of the second button would be the right border of the first button. Okay, and so on. All right, so this is what is in my CSS file. All right, So now, let's go to the main.js file where we would include all of our code in it. All right. So first thing is we have to convert the canvas element, which is this, okay, this canvas element into a fabric canvas. All right. And this is how it's done. So you can say let canvas be equals to new fabric dot canvas. Okay, so this is how it's written. And let's give it some properties. So the width of the canvas, I want the width to be the entire width of the windows and the height to be entire height of the windows. All right. So window dot inner width for width, and the height would be window dot inner height. All right, and I think this should be enough for the time being. But before we save, okay, let's try to inspect this first. All right, and see what we have. Okay, so if we go to the body, we have a canvas over here. All right, and it's 300 by 150 pixels. Okay, so let's say if I save it right now, I save this file. Okay, and I think I've forgotten one thing is to reference. Okay, what is the remember I gave an ID of canvas over here. I actually have to reference, okay, this canvas variable to that ID, and this is how it can be done, like this, I believe. So let's check. Okay, let's inspect. And as you can see now, the canvas is being changed into the fabric canvas. And now we have a width of 1920 pixels and a height of 979 pixels. All right. And fabric has actually converted that canvas element, okay, into a div. And within this div, all right, it has two canvas, okay, a lower canvas and an upper canvas. So these two canvas, all right, it actually has two purposes, okay, and I believe the lower canvas is where all the objects are drawn, and the upper canvas is where all the interactions will occur, okay, so the event listeners like mouse down, mouse up, mouse move, and so on. All right, so we have this fabric canvas, okay, being created, right? Okay, now is to add some functionalities to these three buttons, and we want to, okay, after clicking on any of these buttons, we want to create all these different three types of shapes over here. All right, and we will be using paths to do that. Okay, so going to this Fabric.js, if we go to the tutorial, all right, so objects can be created using Fabric.js, and one of the ways to create objects is using paths. Okay, so if you click on path and path group over here, all right, so paths, okay, they are actually well, quite different, okay, from other types of objects that are created using Fabric.js. Okay, so paths, all right, we actually need to learn how to write the instructions on what kind of path we want to create. Okay, so like let's say for instance, okay, and you can see this funny instruction over here. All right, let me enlarge it. So, okay, what does this mean? All right, now M stands for, okay, where is our starting point? Okay, so M is to tell, okay, where we should move our pen to. All right, so M00 means the X coordinate must be 0 and the Y coordinate must be 0. So maybe it's over here. All right, and after that, L, okay, would be the command for what to draw. Okay, for this case, it is a line. All right, L stands for line. So from this starting point, 0, 0, all right, and if we have an L, it means we want to draw a line. Okay, to where? To 200, 100. All right, so 200, 100 is over here. Okay, the S coordinate is 200, the Y coordinate is 100. So 100 down. All right, and L, okay, means we want to draw another line. All right, and this time it will be to 170, 200. So it's over here. And Z is to close up, okay, the shape. All right, so Z would be from here all the way back to here. Okay, but some of you might be wondering, all right, the starting point is 0, 0, but obviously the starting point here is not 0, 0. Okay, it's because when we set this, all right, the object, okay, is being moved to the left 120 pixels to the left and 120 pixels from the top. All right, so from the left 120 pixels and from the top 120 pixels. Okay, but originally, all right, this shape, okay, is based on this commands over here. Okay, and after that, the path or the shape has been moved, all right, according to this position. All right, left 120 pixels, top 120 pixels, and after that we can add the object. All right, so for lines, okay, we will be doing something similar to this. So we will have these commands. M is a starting point and L would be where we want the line to be drawn to. All right, so we only have M and all the way up to L. Okay, we do not need the Z and the other L. All right, now let's add some functionalities, okay, to these three buttons. All right, so what we can do first, okay, we want to get all these IDs, okay, of the buttons that I have actually created. And this is one way that we can do it. Okay, so we can say let this variable be function, okay, and this will be EL, and EL, okay, actually stands for equals to document.get element by ID. Okay, hang on a second. This will be EL over here, and I shouldn't have this. I should say this should be return. Okay, we should return document.get element by ID, and this should be, okay, and yes, this should be EL over here. And okay, what does this mean? All right, so let's say if I write this down, okay, so let's say one of the buttons, okay, the first button, the ID is line button. All right, so if I paste it over here, okay, and I console.log this, console.log this, all right, see what happens. Okay, so as you can see, okay, it is the line button over here, okay, in our console. All right, so this is how you can capture all the different elements using this way. So instead of doing it the traditional way, so meaning, let's say, I can say let line button, so I can create a variable let line button equals to document dot get element by ID line button. All right, then if I console.log this, right, so line button, I get the same thing. All right, so I get the same thing as well. Okay, so it's your preference. All right, which way do you want it to capture all these elements? All right, you can create another variable, okay, for all the elements that you have created over here with all these IDs, or you can just retain, okay, using all these IDs using the first way that I've mentioned. All right, so for this case, we will be using the first way. All right, so this over here. So now, okay, since we have 3 buttons, all right, and these 3 buttons are actually quite similar in the sense that they actually create quite similar shapes. All right, it's because it's all just lines. Okay, so the only difference is the number of arrowheads. All right, from 0, 1 to 2. Okay, so I will actually create an array, okay, of these 3 buttons. So what do I mean? Let shape buttons be equals to an array. So in the first item would be the line, the line button. Okay, and the second would be the single arrowhead line button. And the third would be the double arrowhead line button. All right. So now, this shape buttons is an array that consists of these 3 buttons. And we can actually create one, we can create a for loop, all right, for all these 3 buttons and write our functionalities in this loop. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So since there are 3 of them, okay, we can say let number of buttons be equals to shape buttons dot length, and for let I equals to 0, I less than number of buttons I plus plus, and for each of them, so shape buttons. Okay, so this means, all right, this for loop, okay, it goes through, okay, each and every one of these buttons. Okay, the first button, second button, and the last button. So when I is equals to 0, okay, it means it's referring to this line button, the first button. All right, and we add an event listener to this. So add event listener. So it will be a click event. And let's write our functions, okay, what we want to happen, okay, when we click this. All right, so for all of these, each of these 3 buttons, all right, whatever that we write inside here, okay, it will apply to each of these 3 buttons. All right, so the first thing, okay, what I want to do is to get rid of this selection box. Okay, as you can see, if I press my mouse down and I move it, I have this selection box. So I do not want this when I draw the lines. All right, and we can say canvas dot selection is equals to false. All right, now when we do this, okay, so I have not clicked the button, so the selection box is still true. All right, but if I click on one of these, as you can see now, there's no more selection box. All right, and the next thing is we want to switch on 3 event listeners, okay, that will enable us to draw the shapes needed. All right, and these 3 event listeners are the mouse down, mouse move, and mouse up event. Okay, so canvas dot on. This is how you how you switch on the event listeners using Fabric. Okay, so canvas dot on, and let's make it an object. So we have 3 events. Mouse, this should be mouse down. Okay, I don't think this is how you should write it. Okay, so let's go to the website. How do we write the event listeners? All right, we can go to the documents. Okay, let's say canvas. All right, mouse down. Okay, so this is how we should write it. So mouse down. Okay, and let's give a name to the function for mouse down. So let's say adding shape on mouse down. Okay, so adding shape of mouse on mouse down, and the next one would be mouse move. So it's not adding shape anymore, it's actually drawing shape on mouse move. Okay, and the last one would be mouse up event. So it's stop drawing shape on mouse up. All right. So these 3 functions, we have to write some coding inside here. So this is the first on mouse down. This would be the second, and this would be the third. All right, so now we have these 3 functions over here. Okay, let's focus on the first. Okay, on mouse down, adding shape on mouse down. So when we press our mouse, all right, we want the line or the arrow, okay, to be added on the canvas. As for now, there's nothing. All right, if I press on this, I press my mouse, there's nothing. Okay, if I click any of these buttons, since we have not written any code yet, there's nothing. All right, but okay, let's say let's try to see whether this works for these 3 buttons. Okay, so let's console.log. All right, console.log success. All right, so on mouse down, let's say if I click on the last button, as you can see, okay, it has been, all right, the success has been logged out, console over here. All right, so it does work, and now we have to write some coding. So on mouse down, we want the objects to be created. All right, and we have to give some variables to the objects first. So the first one would be the line. So let line, and we have, okay, do not forget that we have the arrowheads as well. So we have 2 arrowheads. So arrowhead 1, arrowhead 2. We want to create, okay, either a line or a line with only 1 arrowhead or a line with 2 arrowheads. All right, but since the way that I've written the code over here in this loop function, All right. So in this loop function, okay, all these 3 event listeners are being set up. But how can we tell Fabric, okay, that we actually click on a certain button? So meaning, let's say if I click on this single arrowhead line button, how does Fabric know that this button actually has been clicked? All right, and not the line button or the double arrowhead line button. So this is how we can do it. All right, so we can say let, okay, button index, all right, be equals to 0 first, and in our event listener, so inside our event listener, when we click on any of these 3 buttons, we can say the button index would be the position of all these buttons. All right, so it will be equals to I. Okay, now let's console.log, okay, button index. If I click on the middle button and I press my mouse down here, as you can see, okay, the position is 1. All right, the index is 1. So meaning it's actually the middle button. So let's say if it's the last one, I press my mouse down. As you can see, it's 2 now. First one, press my mouse down, it's 0. All right. So this is how we can tell Fabric which button we have actually pressed. Okay. So now over here, we want to create the line. All right. So we have to create a path. Since we want to use paths to create all our objects, we can say the line will be equals to new fabric dot path, okay, and we want to pass in this, okay, fabric object the commands, okay, of the path that would be created. Okay, all right. So if we go back to the website, Fabric.js website over here, and let's go to the tutorial on the paths. All right. So it means this command, we want to pass this command, okay, well, a command similar to this, okay, into our new fabric object. All right. And this is one way to do it. You can say let line path be equals to, so M, and our starting position should be, okay, it should be the position of our cursor when we press our mouse down. All right. Now, how do we capture the position of our cursor? This is one way. Okay, so we pass in a parameter in our mouse down event, okay, O, and we can say let pointer be equals to canvas dot get pointer O dot E. All right. Now, if I console.log pointer, okay, and I just comment this out first. So if I press, let's say, click on this button and I press my mouse down over here, as you can see, the position of the cursor is 1218 and 252. Over here is 144, 175, and is in the form of an object. All right, so we can actually get all these coordinates. So now, for our line path, okay, so for the first pair of coordinates would be the starting point. And we can do it this way. So plus pointer dot x. Now, if you want to write a string, it must be in the form of a string. So this is how you write a string with our coordinates. all right, and there's a spacing over here, so the x coordinate and the y coordinate will not combine together. All right, so pointer.x, pointer.y. Okay, then L over here. And for the line, okay, where we want, all right, the pen to move from where to where. So from the starting point, and since this is a mouse down, it will be from the starting point to the same starting point, all right, because it's just a mouse down. All right, so you can just copy this. And this is our string over here. And now we can pass in this string of commands in our object, okay, in our fabric path object. And we can give it some properties. All right, what do we want our line to have? What kind of color? So let's say the stroke, okay, we want it to be, let's say, red in color. The stroke width, let's say we want it to have 3 pixels, to be 3 pixels thick. And the origin, X, okay, I want it to be center. Origin, Y, center as well. All right. And we do not want to have any controls. Okay, so false and board, so it should be has controls and has borders to be false as well. Okay, I think this should be alright for the time being. Okay, and we have to add this. So canvas dot add line, and we have to render it. So canvas dot request render all. All right. So let's say let's try this out. So if I click on the line and if I click over here, okay, you do not see anything, and that is because it's actually a very small point. Okay, so it's because it's from the starting point to the starting point. All right, so you can't actually see the line. All right, but later on when we write some functionalities, okay, some coding for mouse move event, hopefully we would see the line. Okay, so before we move on to the mouse move, all right, this is, okay, this line would be created for these 3 buttons. Whenever we click any of these 3 buttons, we want to create the line. All right, but let's say if I click on the single arrowhead line, I also want to create one of the arrowheads. In fact, I only want to create one of them, and double arrowhead I want to create 2. All right, so how can we do this using paths? So we can say let, not let, we already have the variable arrowhead 1, can say equals to new fabric dot path, and let's come up with a path for this. So let arrowhead path be equals to, all right, now what kind, okay, what kind of coordinates do we want? So we want something like this, okay, a triangle. All right, so what we can do is to have a starting point 0 0, maybe over here 0 0, all right, but it needs to be an isosceles triangle. Okay, so an isosceles triangle, so it will go down this way, go this way, and go back up. All right, so let's say this is 0 0, so it has to go down halfway and then go back here and return back to its starting point. So if this is 0, 0, okay, you can actually decide how big your arrowhead, okay, should be. All right, so let's say if this is 0, 0, and if I go to the left, okay, the x coordinate, let's say, is 20 over here, and it goes down by 10 pixels. All right, so 0, 0, this will be 20, 10, and it goes back here. So this will be 0, 20, and Z. All right, so hopefully you understand, okay, what are the coordinates. So first is 0, 0, then L, it will be 20, 10, and L, 0, 20, and Z. All right, so we can create this. We can pass in the path commands in our object over here, and let's give it some properties. So let's say the fill, I want it to be red in color. The stroke, okay, none, or we can just leave it empty like this. And the stroke width, say 0 pixels. All right, and the origin and the has controls as borders would be the same for the line as well. Okay, this is the arrowhead 1, and arrowhead 2 would be the same. Right? And since this is a mouse down, we have not actually given a position where we want these arrowheads to be added on our canvas. So we want it to be at the starting point. Pointer, sorry, not starting point, but at where our cursor is, pointer.x, pointer.y. So the top would be pointer.y. The left would be pointer.x. All right, and we have to add this. Now, instead of adding one by one, so should copy this as well. So we can add all at the same time over here. So we add the line, we add the arrowhead 1, we add the arrowhead 2. All right. Now let's see what happens. So let's say if I click on the last button, I press my mouse down. As you can see, okay, the line and actually 2 arrowheads are being added. All right, but because one is on top of the other, you can only see one of them. But there is a problem now, because if I click on the middle, okay, there are actually 2 arrowheads, but the middle button only requires 1 arrowhead. And then if I click on the first button, we still can see the arrowhead. And that is because we have not added any conditions in our mouse down. All right, so this means, all right, remember we have included this button index, and this button index tells Fabric which button actually has been pressed. Okay, so if it's the first button, the index should be 0. And for this case, all right, the arrowhead 1 and arrowhead 2 should not be added at all. Okay, so what we can say over here, right, if button index equals to 1, I should write it down over here instead. Arrowhead 1 should be inside here. Okay. And else if So it's not equals to 1 only, but or button index equals to 2. Okay, so it means these two buttons, single arrowhead and double arrowhead. All right, we should have arrowhead 1 to be created. So this means that this arrowhead is arrowhead 1. So for these two objects, arrowhead 1 is always created. All right, but for the third object, arrowhead 2 will be created, but arrowhead 2 is not created for the middle button. So we can say else if button index, okay, not else if, but if again, if button index equals to 2, so I should include it over here. All right, if button index equals to 2, so arrowhead 2 would be created. All right, so now when we add the objects, okay, it needs to be within the conditions, so it cannot be outside over here. So let's say for the line, since all three buttons have the line, we can create the line for all three of them. And for this, all right, we can create the arrowhead 1. Okay, and inside this condition, it will be the arrowhead 2. All right, and we request render all outside. So again, when we created the line, we add the line for all three of them. No conditions are needed because all three of them must have a line. Okay, and after that, we gave a path to the arrowhead. And if our button index is the first, so which is the single arrowhead, only arrowhead 1 is created and the arrowhead 1 is added. And if it's the last button, double arrowhead button, the second arrowhead is created and added as well. All right. So now if we test this over here, so line, as you can see, all right, there's no arrowheads. Okay, for the second button, we can see the arrowheads, and the third button, okay, so although it might seem there's only one arrowhead, but there should be 2. All right. Okay, now how can we tell that there is 2? Well, what we can do is to give an angle to both arrowheads. So let's say for the double arrowhead, the arrowhead 1 is pointing to the right, okay, and the angle is 0. If I want the second arrowhead to point to the left, the angle shouldn't be 0. It should be 180 degrees. So the arrowhead 2, we give it an angle of 180. I think this should be sufficient. Let's see. All right, yes. Okay, so as you can see, 180 degrees. We have created the line and the 2 arrowheads over here. And the next one would be the mouse move event. All right. So when we move the mouse, we want the line to extend out and obviously the arrowheads to move further apart from one another. So let's get started for that. So let's give it a parameter so that we can find out where our cursor is, the position of our cursor. Can just copy this. All right, now when we move the mouse, one thing that we need to do is the line should only extend when the mouse is being pressed down. Okay, so this means that we have to actually add a condition. All right, when we press our mouse down, firstly we can say let mouse down be equals to false. And over here, we say mouse down will be equals to true. Alright, now if our mouse down is true, the mouse move event would be executed. Okay, so if mouse down is equals to true, alright, execute whatever there's inside here. Okay, and if our mouse is up, we'll say mouse down would be back to false. Alright. Now, for our mouse move event, okay, when we move the cursor, alright, when we move the cursor, we want the line to extend out and our cursor will be at a different position. Okay, and this means that if we go back to the paths for the line, alright, these two coordinates over here, okay, they are different. Okay, they are different from the mouse down event. Okay, it will be the new x coordinate and the new y coordinate of the cursor. Now, how do we change this? Okay, let's console.log the path of the objects that are created for the line. Okay, and let's say for the mouse down, if I want to console.log this line object, .log line, okay, we can actually adjust these positions, okay, when we console.log this first. So let's say I press my mouse down over here. As you can see, there's actually a line created and these are the properties. Alright, these are the properties over here. So a fill of black, okay, since there's no, we did not include the fill. Property has borders false, has controls false. Alright, and as you can see, where is it? Alright, the path over here. Alright, the path property, it has two arrays. Okay, the first array is the command M. Okay, the command M over here. And there are two coordinates, X and Y. And the second array is the command L. There are two coordinates. Since the starting and the ending point are the same, we do not actually see the line. So we want to adjust these two values, okay, to our new cursor coordinates. So we actually have to get this property and the positions of these two numbers to adjust them. All right. So over here, okay. So coming back to here, for the line, okay, we have to get that path property. So line.path, and the position is 1, okay, and this 413, the x coordinate is position 1, this is position 2. All right. So this array is at position 1, and this number is at position 1, this number is at position 2. So position 1, index 1, and position 1 over here. We say that this will be pointer.x. And for position 2, for that array, is the y coordinate of the cursor. So pointer.y. And we have to tell Fabric to set this coordinate so that the line object will be selectable later on. So set coordinates. Okay, and this also tells Fabric where the line has been drawn. Alright, so line.set coordinates, and we have to render it. Canvas.request render all. Alright, let's see what happens. Okay, if I click over here. Okay, we do not see the line. All right, we do not see the line. And why is this so? Now going back here, and I believe it's because of the object caching. All right, now for paths, okay, we have to switch off the object caching. So object caching, I think it's object caching. All right, so false. Okay, as you can see now, the line is being drawn. All right, so take note. When we draw paths, okay, the object caching should be false. Now, one thing about when creating paths, okay, Fabric has well, I would say a limitation. All right, when we create path, and if we want to select the lines, okay, after the path is created, if we actually altered the path, all right, the width and the height of the original path, okay, is actually not updated. Okay, what do I mean by that? All right, let's say for our mouse up event, let's say if we console.log the line, okay, and for the mouse down event, we console.log the line as well. So mouse down, okay, and mouse move and mouse up. All right, now let's check the width and the height. So the height is 0, the width is 0. All right, now after the mouse is up, the height is still 0, and the width, it is still 0. Okay, so there is a problem over here. Now because of this, all right, if we want to switch off the functionalities of these 3 buttons later on, and we try to select the line, okay, we can't actually do it. All right, we can't select that line. So let me just illustrate that. Okay, what we can do on our mouse up, we can switch off all these 3 event listeners. So this is how you switch it off. All right, and okay, so now it's switched off, so I can't draw any more lines. Now if I want to select and I press over here, I can't select this. Okay, but if I select the original position, I'm able to do it. So this is something that I think Fabric should look into. Okay, and one of the ways to rectify this, all right, one of the ways to rectify this is to recreate the line. Okay, is to recreate the line and having the updated width and updated height. Okay, but some of you might ask, why don't we just change the width and the height to the correct values? All right, so let's try to do that. Okay, let's say if we try to change the value. So over here we can say let width be equals to the pointer.x minus the starting position, and we can get that starting position like this. So we have to get the first array and the first number. All right, so this is the width, and let height be pointer.y, and this would be the second. Okay, and we can set it so line dot width equals to width, line dot height equals to height. All right, and let's try. Okay, so let's say on mouse up we switch off all these events. Okay, So now, okay, as you can see, I can select some, okay, only a part of the line, okay, up to here can select, but over here I can't select the line at all. So over here from the middle point, okay, I'm not able to select the line. So if I draw a longer one, all right, it's only from the middle. Right now, this is something peculiar, okay? So it seems that the selection only stops at the middle of the line, okay? So from the starting point to the middle point of the line, I'm able to select it, but the second half of the line, I'm not able to select it. So somehow the selection box has been shifted, okay? And we can actually show it over here. So for the line, okay, let's say has borders. Okay, let's comment this out. Has controls, comment this out as well. All right. Let's create this line. Okay, so as you can see, the selection box, okay, half of the line is out of the selection box. And this is quite peculiar. Okay. And we have to try to rectify this. Okay, why is this so? I think maybe it has something to do with the negative values. Okay, because pointer.y, our current y coordinate over here, is smaller than the starting position. So when we do the height, okay, the height is actually a negative value. So let's make this positive. Math.absolute. Same thing for the width. Math.absolute. If we create the line. Okay, so now the box is upright, but still we have this problem. Okay, half of the line is actually out of the box. And I think that y is added at the center is because of our origin. Okay, origin X is center, origin Y is center. So that's why the starting point, okay, is being added at the center of this boundary box over here. So there are a lot of variables, okay, that we have to take into consideration. And if we want this to be at the bottom left, the origin X should be left and the origin Y should be bottom. But we have to keep on changing depending on where the line is being tilted. Okay, so if we draw another line like this, now if we want this to be over here, okay, the origin X should be the left and the origin Y should be at the top. Okay, so we have to consider a lot of combinations. All right, and I think the easiest way, okay, is just to create another object, okay, a new object that looks the same as this. So it means we delete this object on our mouse up event, and we recreate this line with the newly created path that we have. All right, I think that would be the most easiest. Okay, and I think Fabric should look into this. Okay, how to update this boundary box that coincides or fits nicely, okay, for every object when paths are created. All right, so over here, okay, let's comment all this out first. And for our mouse up event, okay, what we want to do is to remove the line and recreate that line. Okay, so but before we remove the line, we have to get what that path is. And say let updated path updated line path be equals to line dot path. All right. If I console.log this updated line path, so you can see, all right, so we have the updated line path over here, and now we have to remove this line. So canvas dot remove line, and we have to create another line. So line now equals to, can just copy this, oops, over here. Okay, so instead of line path, it will be the updated line path. All right, and we have to add this line again, canvas dot add line, and canvas dot request render all. And let's see now whether we can have the updated line and select it. All right. Okay, so as you can see, I can select it. So let's say if I comment this out, and let's see the selection, the boundary box. Okay, so now it fits nicely. All right, so this is one way to circumvent this issue. Okay, and hopefully in the latest next few updates in the near future, Fabric would rectify this issue. All right, so whatever line that I draw, I can select it, and the boundary box fits nicely around the line. Okay, the two endpoints of the line. All right. Now, if you have a better way, okay, so you can just leave it in the comment section, and we can discuss about it. Okay. Now that we have created the line, this is for when we just want the line to be created. But let's say if I want the arrows, okay, lines to be created as well, I need to move the arrowheads. All right. So the position of the arrowheads, okay, we have to decide which arrowhead do we want to move. Do we want to move the first arrowhead? All right, or do we want to move the second arrowhead? So I believe we should move the first arrowhead. All right, the second arrowhead remains on its own. Let's do that on the mouse move event. So on the mouse move, the arrowhead 1 should have a position. The left position should be pointer.x, and the arrowhead 1 again, the top position should be pointer.y, and we have to set the coordinates for this. All right, and now let's see what happens. Okay, so as you can see, the arrowhead 1 follows, okay, wherever the cursor is. But now there's another problem, is the arrowhead is not pointing to where we want it to be. All right, so we actually have to change the angles of the arrowheads. Okay, so coming back here on our mouse move event. All right, in order to change the angle, okay, we actually have to split, okay, the canvas, okay, into 4 quadrants. All right, so let's say this is an imaginary x-axis over here and an imaginary y-axis. Okay, so there are 4 quadrants: first, second, third, and fourth. All right, now in the first quadrant, okay, the position of the arrowhead 1, alright, the x coordinate is more than that of the x coordinate of the arrowhead 2. And the y coordinate of the arrowhead 1 is lesser than the y coordinate of the arrowhead 2. Alright, so this is one condition. Okay. And over here, can say, okay, let me write it down over here. If arrowhead 1 dot left, okay, is more than or equals to arrowhead 2 dot left. Now there are two conditions for this. So let me show it over here. So one condition, okay, is that the top position of arrowhead 1 is lesser than the top position of arrowhead 2. And the other condition is the top position of arrowhead 1 is more than the top position of arrowhead 2. Alright? So sometimes I say left position, sometimes I say x coordinate, or top position, y coordinates. They actually mean the same thing. So top position means the y coordinates, and the left position means the x coordinate. Alright? So there are two conditions. So if arrowhead 1 dot top is less than or equals to arrowhead 2 dot top, so we have to write some coding over here, or else if is more, okay, more than arrowhead 2 dot top. All right, so let's look at the first condition. Okay, so it means this condition over here. So we want this arrowhead to be pointing in this direction. It should be tilted in this direction. And this involves a little bit of trigonometry. Alright, we actually have to find what is the angle. So let's say if this is my horizontal axis over here. Okay, can draw a line like this over here. And let's say this is my horizontal axis. So we want to find what is this angle. So this angle would tell us how much to tilt this arrowhead to this in this direction. Alright, now how do we find this angle? Well, we have to find out what is the height. Okay, what is the height with respect to this horizontal axis, and what is the width, okay, from here all the way to here. What is the horizontal width? And this is quite easily achievable. Okay, in fact, I should not have deleted that width and height just now, so let's retype it. So let width be equals to, alright, pointer dot x minus line dot path, the first array and the first number. Okay, and we want this to be a positive value. Math dot absolute. Alright, and let height be equals to pointer dot y in the second number, okay, in the first array. Now this will give us the width and the height, alright, of the line, and from there we can use trigonometry to find out the angle. So this angle, okay, would be the inverse tangent of the height divided by the width. Okay, so if you do not forgotten your math, alright, trigonometry, you can look it up. Okay, so the angle is actually the inverse tangent of the height over the width. So say let angle be equals to math dot A tangent. So this is how you write the inverse tangent. So it will be the width divided by the height. And I think I'll write it over here. Let the ratio be equals to, not width divided by height, is actually the height divided by the width. Oops, width. So inverse tangent of this ratio, and let's console.log this angle. All right. So over here, as you can see, we have the angle, but this angle is actually in the radian format. We can easily change this into the angle format by changing this into, so we divide this by math.pi. Yeah, if I remember correctly, it's math.pi. Then we multiply this by 180 degrees. Now let's see the angle. As you can see, now the angle is in the degree format. All right, so over here is nearly to 90. And it decreases back again. And over here it's 0, nearly 0 degrees. All right, so we can use these angles to help us tilt the arrowhead. Okay, now for the arrowhead 1, let's say for this, the angle is 33 degrees. Okay, it's 33 degrees over here. And we want the arrowhead to tilt, okay, in the anti-clockwise direction to 33 degrees. Or we can rotate it in the clockwise direction, but it wouldn't be 33 degrees. It would be, okay, 360 minus this angle, 33 degrees. Okay, so if I want it to rotate in the clockwise direction, okay, so from here, I rotate it in the clockwise direction. It will be 360 minus this angle, 33 degrees. So let's do that. So for the arrowhead 1, if the arrowhead 1 is above arrowhead 2, so arrowhead 1 dot angle, we want this to be 360 degrees minus the angle. All right, and let's see what happens. Okay, as you can see, the arrowhead 1 follows wherever the cursor is and is tilting in the correct direction. And this is only when the arrowhead 1 is above arrowhead 2. All right, if it's below, okay, nothing happens because we have not write any coding. Okay, so let's say if it's over here, now the angle would be 30, let's say around 30 degrees over here. So we want it to rotate always in the clockwise direction. So the angle would be not 360 degrees, but it's just angle. All right, let's see. As you can see, okay, the arrowhead 1 is tilted correctly. Now we have to do the same for the arrowhead 2. So let's say if my arrowhead 1 is tilted this way, maybe it's roughly around, let's say 360 minus 30, so 330 degrees. We want the arrowhead 2 to be in the opposite direction. And that means, okay, we can actually add 180 degrees. All right, 180 degrees for arrowhead 2. So over here, arrowhead 2, the angle would be plus 180 degrees. Let's see. Okay, as you can see, the arrowhead 2 also follows as well. All right, there are many ways to do this. If you do not want to add 180 degrees, you can also subtract. I believe you can subtract 180 degrees. Okay, it will still work as well. All right, so you have to be quite familiar with the angles involved. Okay, if it's in the opposite direction, right, we can add 180 or subtract 180. So this is if our arrowhead 1 is above arrowhead 2. Now if it's below, so angle plus 180 degrees. Let's do that. Okay, as you can see, all right, both arrowheads are tilting correctly. Okay, now let's do it the same for the other side. Okay, so far now the other side, okay, we have not written any coding, and for the other side, the arrowhead 1 left position is lesser than the arrowhead 2 left position. So else, right? And we have these two conditions again. It can be either above or below. Now if it's above, okay, arrowhead 1 is above arrowhead 2, all right. Now the angle is from here to here. Okay, let's say there's an imaginary horizontal axis. So let's say this is 30 degrees. So we want this arrowhead to rotate. All right, rotate 180 degrees plus this angle. Okay, so it will tilt this way. All right, so 180 degrees plus this angle. So this would be arrowhead 1 is 180 plus. All right, let's comment all this out first. Let's see what happens. Okay, as you can see, all right, arrowhead 1 is tilted correctly. So now for arrowhead 2, it must be in the opposite direction. So we have to add 180 degrees again. So 180 plus 180 is 360, but instead of minus, it will be add. All right. So let's test this out. As you can see, it's tilted correctly now. All right. So let's do the same when the arrowhead is below. Okay, arrowhead 1 is below arrowhead 2. All right. So when it's below, the angle, let's say this is 30 degrees. So arrowhead 1, the angle must be 180 degrees minus 30 degrees. All right. So arrowhead 1, 180 degrees minus, okay, the angle. And for arrowhead 2, it will be, we have to add. So it will be 360 degrees minus, we have to add 180 degrees to this angle. All right, so it will be 360 degrees eventually. Okay. So let's test this out. Yes. All right, so now all whatever positions, okay, my cursor goes to, okay, the arrowheads are pointing correctly. Okay, let's try for the single arrow. All right, the single arrow, okay, we have a problem over here. Okay, for the when it's like this or like this. All right, and I also see that somehow this arrowhead is moved as well. Okay, and this is because in our mouse move, all right, we actually only focus on the double, okay, arrowhead. So we have to add some condition to this, and going back to the button index, if button index is equals to 2, oops, let me copy this again. If button index is equals to 2, it means that the double arrow line is pressed, is clicked on. This should happen. All right. Then else if, okay, maybe this should be else if and if over here. But now let's say if it's the single arrow line. All right. So if button index equals to 1, so there's no arrowhead 2. Okay. It's just arrowhead 1. All right. And this would be, well, in a sense, much, it's quite similar, okay, to this. But now we actually have to replace arrowhead 2 with something else. All right. And how we do that is we can say that let original position, okay, or you can say let starting point x be equals to this. All right. So we can actually substitute this for, oops, start point x. This would be start point y. So let start point y be equals to 2 over here. Okay, so now this arrowhead 2 dot left is actually start point x. Oops. Start point x. All right. And start point y is the top position of arrowhead 2. Okay, we shouldn't have arrowhead 2 over here. So all this would be start point y. So I think all this, we can actually add a condition to wrap all this up. So if button index is equals to 1 or button index equals to 2. So you can wrap all this up. And for this, we have to set the coordinates for both arrowheads for when button index is 2. And for this, we have to set the coordinates for arrowhead 1. All right, now let's come back here and check it. So, single arrow. All right, cannot read properties of undefined. The line is 136. All right, it should be out. It should be inside. So this is actually outside. Should be over here instead. Okay. All right, as you can see now, we have the single arrow and the double arrow. Okay, and if we want the line, we have the line. All right. And another thing. All right, let's say if I want to create a line, but it's near to any of the objects. All right. Now, as you can see, although I'm creating the line, but I actually have selected the object, okay, where my cursor is near to. And we want to avoid this. So what we can do is to make it unselectable first. Okay, so we can make the line unselectable, or okay, so selectable under the mouse down. So when we create the line, it should be false. Okay, should be false over here. And I think this should be sufficient. All right. So let's try. So over here, and let's say if I want to draw a line near here. Okay, so I'm still able to select it, select the line. Alright, so let's see. Is it selectable? Selectable. Alright, let's go to the documents over here. Okay, under documents and under objects. Okay, let's search for selectable. Alright, selectable. When set to false, an object cannot be selected for modification. Alright, when it's selectable, false. So selectable is false over here. Alright, so let's try this again. Okay, I'm still able to select it. Okay, I know why. It's because I actually have recreated this line. So this selectable shouldn't be over here. Alright, it should be on the mouse up event. Okay, remember, we actually recreated the line. So it should be over here. Alright, so selectable is false. So now if I draw a line, I'm not able to select it. So if I draw another line, oops, if I click on this, alright, draw another line, alright, I'm not able to select the previously created line. Okay, and another thing, alright, let's say if my line is blue, okay, my recreated line, I change it to blue. Now if I draw the double arrow, okay, and if I remove, okay, lift up the mouse, alright, as you can see, the blue line is created and it's actually above these two arrowheads, but we want this line to be below the two arrowheads, and what we can do is to send it backwards, right? And this is how we can do it. So canvas dot send to, or instead of sending backwards, I think we can move the two arrowheads forwards. All right, so canvas dot bring to front. I think it's bring to front. Okay, arrowhead 1 and arrowhead 2. Now this is only if we drew the double arrow, but if we drew the single arrow, it will only just be arrowhead 1. So we have to add some conditions. Right? If button index equals to 1 or button index equals to 2, okay, so I think it should be button index equals to 1. I think this would be better. Bring to front arrowhead 1, button index equals to 2. Else if arrowhead 1 and arrowhead 2 will be brought to the front. Let's check it out. Alright. We can see that the line is behind. Okay, it's behind. Now we can change this blue to red back again. Alright, now there is another issue, okay, but I'll talk more about it later on, is the selectability. So let's say if I do not want to draw any more lines, alright, and if I do not want to draw any more lines, I want to select this line, but now we have selected the selectability to be false. So later on, okay, will have to create another button to deactivate, okay, this and this all these events now is deactivated when it's mouse up, but I do not want this to be deactivated or mouse up. I want to keep on drawing when I press my mouse down. So later on we will create a button, and once we press that button, the line selectability would be set back to true. Okay, so let's comment this out first, and let's create another button. And this button would be given an ID of, oops, deactivate adding shape button. All right, and let's add some style to this button over here. So let's give it a padding of 5 pixels. Let's say a background color of blue. Oops, let's say the color should be white. All right, font size should be, let's say, maybe 18 pixels. Position top. Say the position first, sorry. Position should be absolute. Top, say 0 pixels. Left, 0 pixels. Alright, and the display should be none at first. Okay, and let's add some text to this button. So let's say deactivate. Okay, so now when I click on any of these 3 buttons, line button, single arrow, double arrow, I want the button to appear, and we can write it over here. Alright, so when I click, so this ID, deactivate adding shape button, I want the star dot display to be block. Okay, and now let's see. So if I click on the line, as you can see, the deactivate button is shown. Alright, so when I draw a line, okay, and when I click on this deactivate button, first thing is I want to switch off all the 3 event listeners, the mouse down, mouse move, and mouse up, and I want to select the line as well. So let's add some coding functionalities to this button. So we can do it over here. Dot add event listener. So it will be a click event. Okay. So this will be moved over here. And we want the line to be selectable. Alright, so line dot selectable equals to true. Okay, and I think I want the display of this line to be none after I click this. Dot star dot display equals to none. Alright, so I withdraw the lines, I click on it, and now I'm able to select. Okay, for this one I'm not able to select. Alright, I think the problem is, okay, is because we have set the line, the selectability of the line to be true, but it's only referring to one of the lines that are created. It's not referring to all of them. Alright, so let's give an ID, okay, to the line. ID, let's say added line. Alright, instead of writing this, we have to get all the objects that have this ID. So canvas.get objects. This is how we get the objects. Then dot for each of them, for each O. All right, oops. For each O. So O would be the object, okay, and if O is dot ID is equals to added line. O dot selectable is equals to true. All right, now let's draw the lines. Deactivate. Okay, I can select this. I can select all of them. All right, so now we can select all of this. Now there's another problem. Let's say if I draw the arrow. All right. Now if I deactivate, as you can see, we need to actually combine, okay, this line and this arrowhead together. And this will be done on the mouse up event. And we actually have to give some ID, okay, on the mouse up event. All right, and for the arrowheads. So on arrowhead 1, okay, let's give it a label. All right, label arrow line. Right. Arrow line, and this will be arrow line. Right, and for this, okay, now for the line, since it's also for the single line without the arrowheads, we have to be a little bit more careful with this. Now this label will only have an arrow line if the two buttons are being pressed, the single arrow line and the double arrow line, and we need to set some conditions. So now this is one way to write the conditions. Okay, for label, if the button index equals to 1, it will be this. Or if the button index equals to 2, it will be arrow line. Or else it will just be this. All right. Okay, let's see. Where is the issue over here? Okay, it should be, I think we can actually combine this. So, or else it should be this. Now, this is one way to write, okay, conditional statements. So, this means that for the label, okay, if the button index is 1 or 2, I will give it a label of arrow line. If not, there is no label at all. Okay, now we have to get all this label of arrow lines and combine them, group them together. And that will be on the mouse up event over here. So, now if button index equals to 1, all right, you can say canvas.getObjects dot for each. All right, and O. And if O dot label has a label of arrow line. Okay, so if it's a single arrow, it means it will be the line has a label of arrow line and the arrowhead one. Arrowhead one here, label of arrow line as well. All right. So once we get these two objects, we have to group them. And this is how we can group them. We can say let single arrow be equals to new fabric dot group. And we have to pass in these two objects. Okay, for this I should place it out over here. right? And over here, I should have, let's say, let objects be an array first. And I need to push in these two objects. So objects dot push O. Now this means that, okay, the first object will be the line, all right? It will be push, okay, into this array, and the arrowhead one will also be pushed into this array. So we will have two objects. Now we have to create a new group, okay, and this will be a new object. So let single arrow be equals to this new fabric dot group, and this will be objects, all right, and let's give it some properties. So we can say we can use almost all of these properties, but some of them we have to change. Okay, we don't need label. I think we do not need stroke width, and selectable. We do not need this. The ID would be, let's say, single arrow. All right. So now we have to add this. So canvas dot add single arrow, and we have to remove these two objects. Okay, the line, the added line, and the arrowhead one. Before we remove that, okay, let's just check whether this works for the arrow, single arrow line. If I deactivate, okay, so as you can see now, both are grouped together. All right. Now, if I remove it, okay, I just want to check whether we are actually duplicating these objects or not. So if I remove canvas.remove line and arrowhead one. Okay, so this is to make sure whether we are duplicating the objects. Alright, so just now that was a duplicate. Okay, so we actually created one more time. Okay, when we created this object, it was another object, a new object. Okay, overlapping the two objects, the line and the arrowhead. So we actually have to remove the line created and the arrowhead one. Alright, so if we do this again, alright, so now we only have a freshly created single arrow lines. Okay, no duplicates, no overlapping. Alright, we can do the same for the double. So it's similar over here. So let objects, arrow line, objects, but now this time it's double. Double over here. Okay, arrowhead 1, arrowhead 2. All right, let's see. Okay, there is a problem here. All right, let's go back here. So if I create a double, okay, everything looks fine. If I deactivate, okay, I can select all this and they are grouped together. If I draw the single, everything looks fine as well. Deactivate, I can select it. All right, and if I draw the line, deactivate, I can select them. But now, just now, we encounter a problem. So if I draw a double, draw a single, okay, there's a problem over here. All right, and in the next video, we will discuss, okay, why do we have this problem? Okay, so see you in the next video.